So my name is Brian Lagunas.
Lagunas.
With an S.
Thank you.
I am the product manager at Invergistics for all their XAML stuff. WPF, Silverlight, Windows 8, all that cool stuff. So if it's a XAML and you want to know about XAML, I'm the guy you want to talk to. You can find me on Twitter, at Brian Lagunas. I can see just whipping those phones out right now, just tweeting right now. So I encourage that. Email me, blagunas@invergistics.com. I'm highly available to you guys. I'm very responsive to emails, almost too responsive to where my boss says stops being so responsive, you're making us all look bad. So it makes me do it more. So if you send me an email, I will reply to you. And I blog.
Dustin Hornick.
Woo! Thanks for joining us. You can get my blog at brianlagunas.com. My boss Jason, he always says, "No, you blog everything on Invergistics." I like my little personal space because I can blog about stuff that doesn't go on the Invergistics website. So I do a lot of things myself. Before I was in Invergistics, I actually wrote code. I can come up here and show code, right? So I am a Pluralsight author. You guys heard of Pluralsight? Cool. Check out my courses, please. Right. So, oh, that's my my meeting saying to talk. Okay. So I run XAML.tv. You guys heard of this yet? It's relatively new. Basically, XAML.tv is all about XAML. It's basically video tutorials where you can go that people submit. I mean, you could submit something if you wanted to. It's content driven by the community. And then once a month, I talk to, I'll interview someone that may be more known in the community, like Pete Brown. He was my most recent contestant, if you will, on the show. But like I said, if you said, "Hey, I got this great thing I discovered how to do, and I want to share that with people," you can submit that to the site yourself. So pretty cool stuff. Okay, enough about me. Let's talk about Prism. Where are my XAML developers? Okay, not bad. Who has never heard of XAML? Don't be shy. If you've never heard of it, let me know. Okay, cool. Who's heard of Prism? Who's used Prism?
Not programming.
So what do you guys think about it? Who can tell me what it is? Someone who's used it, who can tell me what it is?
It's some sort of framework for XAML. I worked on a project that was using it. I never really got much into what it was doing.
Yep, it is a framework. What's it do? What's the framework for?
It's for modular, developing modular applications.
For developing modular application. Boom! Right there, you got it. Nail on the head. It's a composite application framework for building modular applications. So what's modular application mean? It means that I have an application that's broken down into many pieces, and then when I run it, I'm going to compose everything at runtime. Sounds pretty cool, right? Now Prism is only meant for WPF, Silverlight, and Windows Phone currently as the 4.1 release. Waiting for the question. Ah, there it is. Yes, so I'm on the Prism Advisory Board, and October-ish, we're starting our development on the Windows 8 version. Okay, right now we're in the planning process, what makes sense to transfer over. There's some concepts that may not make sense in the Windows 8 style application. Okay, so today, I'm just going to talk about like the basic building blocks, very basic. Prism has a lot of stuff to it. There's no way I can talk about it. How long do I have, by the way?
About an hour and a half.
An hour and a half, it's it?
We can go 3 if you'd like.
Okay, so basically I'm going to talk until you guys tell me to shut up. How's that? When you say, okay, that's enough, then I'll quit. Last time I did that, I think the talk lasted like 4 hours. So, yeah, so be sure to let me know when to stop talking. So basically there's the basic building blocks I want to try to get in an hour and a half is a Bootstrapper, the shell, regions, modules, and views. And we'll discuss all this in detail. Basically, Bootstrapper, it's a common term, right? You've heard the Bootstrapper term before? Who can tell me what a Bootstrapper concept is? This is going to be interactive, so I'm going to ask you questions, and then like responses need to come flowing back.
Your entry point.
It's like your entry points. It's a little class that's responsible for creating stuff and launches your application, right? Then you have a shell. Your shell is just like a master page, right? The web guys, where's all the web people? Really, not as much as I thought, unless some of you weren't raising hands. So basically, it's just your main container, okay? And that main container is going to contain regions. Now, a region is simply a placeholder. You're going to say, hey, I'm going to use this spot in my shell that's going to be used to display content, right? I'm going to inject content into this region. Then you have modules. Think of modules as major functional areas of your application, okay? So let's look at Outlook. We have Outlook open. On the left-hand side, we have all of our groups, right? Mail, contacts, calendar, right? At the top, you have some ribbon tabs. And in the center, you have the main content that shows whatever group you're in. You select emails, whatever, right? So if you start looking at that application, you can start identifying the major functional areas of that app that we pulled out and developed separately that don't depend on anything else. And in that case, email would be its own module. Everything to do with email would just be in a separate project. And we all know what views are. So, to illustrate my point, imagine you're inside Visual Studio, right? And we have the all-encompassing solution. Now, the most common way apps are built is in a very monolithic type. And what I mean by that is you have your solution, and then you have your main project. And that project will contain every view and all the code required to run that application. Now, I'm not talking about your little helper utility classes. You know, you might have a class library that does some helper stuff or utility stuff or whatever. I'm talking like the core functionality of the app is all right there. Okay. In a Prism application, remember those functional areas that we're talking about? Now you have this all-encompassing solution. You have your main project, which may be a Silverlight project or a WPF project, Windows Phone, whatever. And then you have a single view, which is your shell. And that shell will contain regions. Remember what I said what a region was? It's just a placeholder. Okay, so there's your shell. There's your main application right here. That's it. When you hit F5, this is what's going to run. Now you start taking out those major functional areas. You say, okay, I'm going to put them in their own project. And all the views, all the services, all the code required to run that one project will be right there, just nice, encapsulated, right, for each one. So this one might be mail, that would be contacts, calendar, whatever. And then when you run the application through the magic of Prism, the views, you like that? That's my high-tech animation PowerPoint skills. Your view from whatever module you decide will be injected into a region. Pretty simple. That's all my slides. Now we're going to write some code. We're going to write an application. But I'm going to have my backup app here because I don't like to write a whole bunch of code. So we'll just have this launch. Any questions so far? Nope? Okay. So let's create a new project. I like WPF, so it's going to be WPF. And I'm going to stick it in my sandbox folder. Call this live demo. All right, I tried to adjust the font size before you all got here, so let me know. Everyone in the back can see that, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so when I start creating a Prism application, the first thing I do is I delete my main window. It's not because you have to, it's just because it helps illustrate what we're doing here. Now, another thing we have to do is for the non-XAML individuals is a XAML application has an app.xaml file, and basically this is the entry point to your application, right? And in this case, in WPF, we have the startup URI, which tells the application what view you're going to show when the application launches. Well, we no longer need this, so I'm just going to not do that. I'm just going to remove that, so we don't need it. Now we need to add some references. Now, who here has heard that Prism's like really heavy? Like, there's a lot to it, just tons of stuff. It gives you too much, and I don't want to use it in my app because it's so heavy.
we use the Prism guidelines similar to those, they have particular things. Even when we add the Prism, it goes with the tutorials, there are a lot of DLLs and
Okay,
things to
so
connect them.
Prism uses a lot of patterns and concepts that you may not use and may not be aware of. One of those is inversion of control and dependency injection. Who does not know what that is? Everyone knows what that is. Come on. Honestly, someone raise a hand. Okay. Come on, we're all friends here. We're learning, right? So basically, think of, I'm going to explain a container, a dependency injection container. A container is basically a dictionary of types, right? It's just a list of types. And when you ask the container for a type, like, hey, give me one of these, it's going to create it for you. So you're not saying, var object equals new object. You're saying var object equals, hey, container, give me an object. And it will create one for you. And it's like, Brian, why are you doing that? Why not just say new? Well, it's because, have you ever had an object that might have dependencies in its constructor? Right? Well, the container will automatically create those dependencies for you as well. Right? So you don't have to new anything up. And we'll see that when the demo goes on. So, one of those containers is called Unity. And if you use ILC, you're using a container. You might use structure map, you might use spring.net, you might use Unity. So you're going to have one of those references anyways. The next one you need is the patterns. Microsoft.practices.prism DLL. Cool. That's the references I need. Not so heavy, huh? It's actually just one DLL. Now, there's another DLL here called Unity Extensions. Okay? And all this does, it just has a couple of helper methods in there to use with Unity. Yeah,
Is Prism available on NuGet?
I believe it is actually available on NuGet. I haven't checked if we can. I always just have it locally because the way I develop, I don't use NuGet. Oh, we can check. We'll check later. Let's get on. I only have an hour and a half. You guys are killing me. Okay. We need the entry point to our app now. So that we come back to the Bootstrapper. So we need to create a Bootstrapper. And we're going to name mine Bootstrapper. I know, I have to think I'm creative. So Prism provides you with an abstract Bootstrapper class. And they actually give you two. They give you a Unity Bootstrapper, and they give you a Meth Bootstrapper. Who's heard of Meth? You can tell me kind of what it is. Who knows what Meth is?
It's sort of a plugin framework.
Exactly. Managed Extensibility Framework. It's the same framework, it's baked into .NET, but it's what Visual Studio uses to allow you to write add-ins for it. Okay? Now, this is where the religious wars start, and I love lighting that flame. I always use the Unity Bootstrapper. Unless you're using structure map, then you use something else. But basically, I will never use Meth as my container. Okay? Why? Why, Brian? Because Meth is not a DI container. It does inversion of control type things, it does DI type things, but it's not a container. So the way I like to explain it, think Unity Bootstrapper is I have internal working knowledge of this application, how it's built, and I use it and I resolve my types. Meth is I built the app, I launched it into the real world, now you're going to go extend it. I don't know how you're going to extend it, but here's the contract that you to do it. Okay, so you can actually use them together. So having said that, Unity Bootstrapper. Okay, so we need to implement the abstract method called create shell. And you can probably guess what this does. It creates a shell, right? The shell we're talking about. So that means we need to have a shell. We haven't created a shell yet. So let's do that. I'm going to go ahead and add, we're in WPF, so I'm going to add a new window. I'll just call it shell, because I'm so creative. care about that right now. Now I'm going to say return container.resolve. Now there's no resolve of T yet, but there will be in a minute. Oops. And I need to add using Microsoft practices.unity. Okay, so I'm asking my container, which is Unity, to create me an instance of that shell, and it's going to return that from this method. Now what happens under the covers is when this method is called, there's a property that I'm going to show you called shell that gets set to that instance. And we'll see that right now. We're going to override our initialize shell method. This is where we need to run any code what we need to do to initialize our view. We may have something special going on. In our case, we don't. So instead of typing these 2 lines of code, I'm just going to paste them out. Okay, remember that property I told you about called shell? Property on the base class? This is the instance that was created up here. We're casting this to a window because the application current.main window is of type window, and the shell property is of type dependency object. Now, based on what I've told you about the cross-platform, WPF, Silverlight, Windows Phone, why do you think that this shell property is a dependency object and not just a window?
Silverlight doesn't have a window class.
Bam! Silverlight doesn't have a window class. So if I'm writing a Silverlight application, that could not be of type window, right? So it's going to use the lowest common denominator. All right, so if I run this, will this work, do you think? Just based on what we've kind of done? Or have we missed a step?
You actually have to tell the container what to resolve, what shell is.
No, we did that. We told it what shell was. Well, yeah, we did. We created the Bootstrap. We're in it right now.
You have to instantiate it.
We have to instantiate it. You're all over it. So we need to go to our at.xaml.cs and override the onStartup. Get this in view. And basically, we'll just say Bootstrapper, BS, Bootstrapper. That's the only place you'll see new Bootstrapper. And then we run it. So now if I run this, the expectation is we'll get a shell. Holy moly, that was difficult. Prism is so hard. I don't know why. I never used this before. Okay. We're done there. We're done here. Any questions? There's your shell. There's your application. Everything else just now becomes modules and you plug into it.
So how do you have the regions?
Let's do that, shall we? So in this demo, we're going to have one region. Now, of course, in a real app, you might have 12, whatever, right? In this particular one, we're just going to have one. We need to add a namespace here, and for the non-XAML people, basically a namespace is just telling my IntelliSense where to find a particular element, right? A class or properties, things like that. So it's just like a using statement. So Prism, and I believe the schema is, that's not the one I wrote. They renamed it. This looks much better. So that's basically going to give me access to all the Prism stuff within my XAML markup. So I'm going to have a content control here. Now let's talk about regions, elements, and region adapters. This is where it gets a little bit confusing, just a little bit. When I say the term visual tree, does everyone know kind of what a visual tree means? Who doesn't? Don't be shy. Okay, boom. So basically, in XAML, you have what's referred to as a visual tree. It's basically everything that makes up your XAML markup. And as you can see, it's like a parent-child type thing. It's a hierarchy, right? So I have a window, which contains a grid, which contains a content control, which contains something else, which contains something else. You get the idea, right? All that makes up what's called a visual tree. Now, when wanting to use an element, content control, as a region, it has to have a corresponding region adapter. Now this is not something you see on top. It's under the covers. This is what Prism does for you, unless you need a custom one. And basically, what a region adapter does is it says, I'm going to show you how to handle adding elements to this control. For example, Prism gives you a handful out of the box. The two most common are going to be for a content control, meaning any control that has content, a content property. For items control, which is anything that basically contains multiple items, like an item source, right? Tab control, list box, right? Things like that. Now, stack panel doesn't have a region adapter. So let's make this a region right quick. We'll continue our conversation to get it help. The only thing required to identify this element as a region is to give it a name. It's a region now. We're done. Now, we have identified this content control as a region. Now, the underlying code will tell, when we start injecting views, it's going to say, okay, I know this is a content control, it has a content property, so when I get this view that you're trying to hand me, I know to set that content property to that view. If this was an items control, it says, oh, okay, I know I'm dealing with an items control, it has an item source, it has an items property, I know how to add multiple items to that. Okay, we get the idea here? So for stack panel, Prism doesn't provide you with a region adapter for stack panel. But you could write your own. And simply, your code would just say, take this view and add it to the children property of stack panel. Stackpanel.children.add view. That's basically all it does. It just takes the incoming view and instructs the code how to put it into the control. We got that? Cool. Okay, there's my region. Any questions on region? I mean, we're done. That's how you define a region. Now we need modules. And I have OCD, so I have to have things like structured a certain way, or it drives me nuts. Okay, modules. Who can tell me what a module is? Oh, I can't hear what. What?
Project.
A single building block of work.
Single building block of work. You can think of it that way. It's more because it can have lots of code in it, right? It's like a major functional area of your app. And it can contain hundreds of views in it. Whatever is required to make that portion of the application work will be in a module. Now, what I see a lot, this is my OCD coming again, I gotta create a subfolder. What I see happen a lot is when people go to add a module, they'll create it as a class library. And there's nothing wrong with that. You can totally do that. Let's do that. Okay, I have my class library here. I'm going to start creating a module. I don't like to do this. And it's because when I right-click and I go to add new items, look what I get. A Windows form, a user control, component. I don't care about this stuff in a XAML application. It's useless to me. So it's adding more work because I always have to go add new item. So what I actually do, we'll add a new project. I'll make sure it's in here. I'll add a WPF user control library or a Silverlight user control library. And we'll call this module A. We'll delete that guy. Now when I right-click to add new items, look at WPF window, a page, user control, resource dictionary, things I care about when I'm writing a XAML application. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and add our Prism, and we just need Unity here, just Prism and Unity. Was that a hand that went up? Did I see him? Once again, those heavy DLLs that are so cumbersome to add to a project. The only thing required to mark a project as a module is a single class that implements an interface. I'll call this module A module. And this class is called, this interface is called iModule. And it has one contract within it called initialize. Actually, let's leave that in there because I want to prove this works by crashing the system. It's been identified as a module. I have a module. That's all that's required to say that's a module. It doesn't have anything in it, but it will load. So that means we need to tell our Prism application, our shell application, how to load these modules, because we're going to have a lot of them. And some may depend on others, right? You may have module B depends on module A because it has services it requires. So here comes the concept of what's called a module catalog. Just based off the word module catalog, who can tell me probably what it does? It's a log of all your modules. It's a list of modules that need to be loaded. And there's quite a few ways to do this. The place it's done is in your Bootstrapper. There's a method in here that we're going to override called create module catalog. There are a number of ways to create a module catalog. You can create it in code, which we're going to do in this demo because it's fastest. You can have an app.config. You can have a XAML file. You can load it from a directory somewhere on a share, some UNC path. You can download it from the web. You can mix them together. You can say, oh, I'm going to get this one in code. These two are going to come from a directory, and I'm going to load this from an app.config file. Right? So you can mix and match them. I'm going to get rid of this. Module catalog, we'll call it catalog. Okay, so in this particular demo, we're going to do it in code. And that's going to require a hard reference from our shell to our module. Now, this kind of defeats the purpose of a Prism application. In a production app, you probably don't want to do this. You would probably most likely either load them from a directory or some type of app.config file that tells it where to get, you might ship it when it installs, all the DLLs will ship with the product, but you'll have an app.config that tells you where to get it. Does that make sense? Because right now we're adding a tight coupling between our modules, which we want to pull out loosely couple anyways, because the thing about a module is, let's say another department had their own shell, but they wanted my functionality from that module. Well, if it was written to where they weren't tightly coupled, you could just throw that DLL in that directory that they use, and now your module shows up in their shell. Okay, so you want to keep things as loosely coupled as possible. But we're going to add a module to our catalog, type of, what is it? Module A module? Yay. Okay, so now we told the Bootstrapper about our module catalog. We're going to run the application, but it should bomb on us because I didn't take out that exception. I just want to prove that we are hitting the initialize. Okay, we hit it. Great, it died. Awesome. So there, our module is being loaded now. We're completely done with the Bootstrapper. We don't need it anymore.
Got a question on that.
Yeah.
So on the Bootstrapper, that was extending the Unity, right? It's Unity Bootstrapper.
Yes.
And you're talking about modules, which are a Prism concept, but you're overriding things that are in the Unity thing. You're handling it as if it's a dependency injection container. I'm getting confused about where's the modules of Prism concept. How is it that Unity has such intimate knowledge about
So
Prism?
the Bootstrapper is also a Unity concept.
Okay.
This, Prism, yeah, sorry, Prism concept. But in this Bootstrapper implementation, they're using Unity as the container for all the implementation. So all the Prism related code is running, but it's using Unity as its container to resolve these items. So if you wanted to write your own, say you use structure mapping, I don't know, do you use something? What do you use?
For dependency
Yeah.
injection, generally what I've used is like Inject.
Okay, Inject. Let's say that you want to use an Inject. You would basically derive from their Bootstrapper base class and create your own Inject Bootstrapper and implement the abstract methods
Right.
that implement that type of functionality.
Absolutely, but Inject wouldn't have anything, wouldn't know anything about like a spring map. It feels like Unity as your dependency injection container has a lot of knowledge about modules, module catalog. Is that not the Prism module that you're referring to?
Unity
there?
doesn't know about these.
So the module catalog is a Unity concept.
No, it's a Prism concept.
That's where I'm confused.
Yeah, so Unity is just a container. It's just resolving objects. So when the module's loaded, it's going to loop through all these modules and it's going to create them. It's going to use Unity to create them. In your case, you would use an Inject to create them. But this is a Prism concept. We're just using Unity as the mechanism to create objects. That's it.
Maybe I'm catching it. I think you're thinking that the Unity container they're using comes from Unity, right? It comes from Prism, right? So the Unity container that he's overriding here comes from the Prism assembly, not Unity.
That's it.
Oh, okay. Good. Everyone good on that? Cool. Okay, so now we need a view. Line of control, say view A. We'll throw something in here just so we have something. There we go. That's all I care about, my view. Now let's talk about actually injecting views, right? We want to get this view from this module that we created into that region we defined. Now that's called view composition, by the way. That's the term they use, view composition. Now there's two ways to achieve view compositions. View discovery and view injection. Anyone want to take a stab at what view discovery is? Just a guess? Okay. Basically, view discovery places the responsibility of creating and showing the view onto the region. Okay, so you're just basically saying, hey region, here's a type of view. I'm going to register this with you, and whenever you're ready, go ahead and create it and show it. I don't care. Whatever you want to do, just do it. I don't care about it. Okay, you have no control over any steps that occurs while that's happening. View injection says, hey region, screw you, I'm handling this because you messed it up last time. Okay? I'm going to create the view, I'm going to initialize any data I need to initialize and do whatever custom code I need to do, and then I will tell you when you can show my view in your region. Okay? So, let's get some copy and pasting going on. Because I need a couple of things. I need an instance of my container, and I need the instance of my region manager. Remember the region manager, we kind of saw that here when we set the region name on the region manager to main content. Oh, and I kind of skipped over this, but I want to point out that in a production application, you want to make that a static. Don't make that magic string. You don't want magic strings. Make that a static, some kind of constant or whatever, and use the static markup extension to reference that in here. And you'll see why that would be handy. Okay, so basically I need an instance of my container. In this case I'm using Unity, so it's iUnity container. And then I need an instance of my region manager, which in this case is an iRegion manager. Now remember, for those of you not really familiar with dependency injection, remember I said about not ever really saying object equals new object. Like we haven't written anything that says module A equals new module A, inject, or it'll create new container, comma, new region manager, right? We're not writing that code. Because our container is smart enough to know, hey, when I resolve module A module, I know it's asking for an iUnity container. And that type, just so you know, these two types, region manager and iUnity container, they've been registered for you in the base class, so you don't see that happening, but it happens under the covers, okay? That's how the container knows about them. It's already been registered for you, taken care of. So basically the container says, you know what? I know what those are, and I'm going to give those to you because you're asking for it. And in this case, it's a singleton. So throughout the app, unless you specifically ask for a different one, it's going to give you the same instance across all your modules. So when you ask for an iUnity container, it's going to give you the same container. You ask for the region manager, it's going to give you the same region manager, unless you specify otherwise. Okay, let's go view discovery. This is where we don't care what happens, just show it whenever you're ready. Manager, register a view with region. Why does it do that? This method takes the region name, which I think we called it main content, and then the view type. In this case, type of, sorry, view A. Okay, so I'm saying I'm going to register type of view A with the main content region. So main content region, whenever you're ready, show it.
And what happens if multiple modules register their own types with the same region?
Okay, so here's the deal with that. You're saying the same type?
Different types. Each module has its own type, but registering with the same region.
Okay, so the way that works is, remember we're talking about the region adapters and the elements you're using, content control versus an items control. So we're using a content control. So if you were to register multiple types with the same region, what you're going to get is the effect of a deck of cards. And you're only going to see the card that's on top in the UI. Okay, now you can use the API to deactivate and activate and show and hide and bring other views to the top. But doing that with a content control, deck of cards you can go through. You can remove them completely or just deactivate and activate to bring them up to the surface. Okay? So if you're using an items control, every single view that you register, it will just show in a list. If you're using a list box, it's going to be a list. Using a tab control, it's going to be in tabs. Okay? And in an items control, only one view can be active at a time.
Can we control what order they show up?
Yes. And that's going to be the order in which they were registered. Okay. So there we go. My view is here. The view from that module is in that region. My show, theoretically, will not know anything about that module. In this particular case it does because we added a hard reference. But in your application, you're not going to do it that way, and your shell will know nothing about any module that exists. And it's like, holy crap, how did that happen? That's amazing. That's pretty cool. Okay. So let's check out view injection. So what was view injection? Yeah, you're responsible for that, right? So that means I need a view. So I need a hey container, go ahead and resolve my view A for me because I need an instance. Run some custom code, do what I need to do. Now, I'm going to make this the long way, just so you kind of see what's going on. Now I need to get my region. There we go. Okay, once you have your region, you can add your view to it. Okay, so you resolve your view, you do some fancy stuff, get the region you want, because you can have as many regions as you need. Once again, this is where you don't want to have the magic string. It'd be nice just to have like a little, constant for that stuff. Get your region and add your view. So now when we run this, same result, different approach. So based on those two approaches, and before I go on, I do want to mention you can do all of this in one line of code for you guys who just can't stand having all those lines and like our line counters. Hey, I'm one of those guys. And you can do it all in one line. I just wanted to break it out and see what's going on. So, based on those two approaches, what do you think a good example of when you would use view discovery?
Pretty much just display items, they don't do very much.
Yeah, display items, maybe status bar, toolbars, navigation, stuff that needs to appear right when the app launches, right? And then probably view injection is going to be in response to maybe a user interaction. They click an item to edit something. And you're going to open up some type of editor. You're going to inject an editor view and have them edit data, or something like that. Or they click one of those toolbars and something happens.
So all these views get instantiated at startup then, and the like 5 views,
Not at startup.
or when
Only when, so with view discovery, it's going to be whenever you register the view with it and whenever the region comes into view in your application. Okay? So if you have a module, let's say you have 2 modules, and right now a view for module A is showing, and you have navigation on the left-hand side. Nothing in module B has been instantiated yet. Now I click on a navigation to go to module B, to load a view. Now, oh, okay, I need to show something. It's going to load it on demand. Now you can say, hey, I just want to go ahead and load everything, go ahead. But you don't have to do that. It's actually more work to do it that way.
So how would
So
you
how do you-
implement, like page flipping, like click a button to switch to the calendar view?
Well, let's look at something like that. We're going to talk about, any questions on, this is the Prism app. That's it. That's all that's required. Those are the core concepts it takes to start writing an app. Any questions on that? That's pretty simple, right?
Is there any kind of penalty depending on how many regions you have? If you get too many modules?
Nope. I haven't had one yet. And so the biggest Prism application I've written was 27 modules in size. Now, of course, we only had 4 regions on the view, but yeah, 27 modules, and we didn't see any performance problems whatsoever. Now, if you get, I don't know, I mean, I think it has a lot to do with how you write apps. Because one thing I always like to mention, Prism doesn't stop you from writing a crappy app. It doesn't prevent you from writing bad code, right? It helps move you in the direction with the IOC and interfaces, right? Everything's testable. They want to support Nvdm, all that stuff. Did you have a question? Okay, I'm just scratching your head. Messing with me. And also, Prism is not, I mentioned Nvdm, Prism is not an Nvdm framework. It doesn't care what pattern you use to construct your views. You can use code behind, MVC, Nvdm, whatever you want, go at it. It's not an Nvdm framework. Okay. Now these are the demos I rewrote last night. They should work. When I hit F5 last night, they worked.
Isn't that what every developer says that? It worked when I tried.
Okay, so this project, the demos I'm going to show now, they have some infrastructure to them. Okay, I'm using Nvdm in there. I got some stuff pre-set out for you because we're only going to cover very specific things now. In this case, we're going to talk about a delegate command. Okay, so first off, who has never heard of a command in XAML land, like an I-command implementation? Okay, so in XAML land, we have this idea of a command. You can think of it like a button click, but different. Okay, now all commands implement an interface called I-command, and that interface has 2 contracts on it. One is a method called execute, and one is another method on it called can execute. Now, the way commands work is that can execute will return a true or false based on logic you provide. And that command will be data bound to a UI element such as a button. Right? So let's say I have an object and I have a save button. Let's not talk about it, let's just look at one. Look at that, I have an object with a save button. Now the way a command works is right now, this button right here, the save button, is data bound to a command that exists on a view model. And for you who don't know what view model is, just think code behind, ripped out from behind the view and put into a different class. Done. View model. I just want to show you this button. Oh, come on. Here we go. Right there. You see I have button, I have some properties set, command equals binding save command. And I'll discuss how data binding works in a sec. But basically, I have that command and it's bound to that button. So, what happens is that can execute is going to return true or false based on logic I provide that says that can be executed. You can invoke that command. So in this particular case, let's look at that logic. Here's my command implementation. We're going to cover this in a sec. I just want to get iCommand figured out. So I have can save. I basically say, hey, does my person have an error? If you do, then you can't save. Otherwise, you can save. And then, of course, our execute method, which in this case is save, will update something. Okay, so there's our can execute and execute. So, with a command, what's special about this is the element that's bound to that command checks that can execute. And if that can execute returns false, that UI element is disabled for you automatically. It handles that UI state. So back in WinForms days, you're like, oh, if this button.enable equals true, else is equals false. Oh, wait, there's this other scenario that came in because the customer asked for that, so we got to do this and true and false, right? You don't have to do that anymore. You just provide your business rule. Why is this true? Why is this false? Now, the second, that can execute returns true, your UI element is enabled. You are allowed to invoke that command. And when you click the button, it invokes that command, which is that method I showed you, your execute method, and runs the code inside of it. Okay? That's iCommand. Now let's look at Delegate Command. Any questions on just a command? No? I must be really good at explaining things. Who in here has heard of Nvdm Lite? Okay, you guys kind of heard of the term a relay command? Same thing. They just call it a delegate command. A delegate command is a special class or a special iCommand implementation that allows you to create a command in line by providing methods as delegates for those execute and can execute. Because if you're just going to create an iCommand, it's like, oh, I have a custom command. You'll have to create a new class, call your class save command, implement the iCommand interface. Okay, now you got to start adding all the code to this class, right? What a pain in the butt. Now I can just create a new instance of this object and provide a method, two methods, and we're done. Now, you can see this delegate command has of t. That of t is a payload. It's your command parameter. In this case, oh, and I want to mention something about these parameters. This has to be a nullable object. It can't be an int, right? It has to be nullable, or you will get an exception. That's why, let's go back to our view here. I have a command parameter of 13. Well, technically that's an integer. But if I were to say that was an integer, I would get an exception because it's not a nullable type. I can make it a nullable integer. So I'm going to use string. Now that command parameter is passed to your can execute and your execute methods. Here's my parameter, string. Okay? So whenever this is queried, you will get that value in there. Same thing on the save. Every time the save is invoked, that parameter is passed along with it. And the way I'm using this parameter is I'm taking the current date time and I'm adding 13 to the years. It's just some random logic, right? Now, I do also want to mention that I am showing you a delegate command of T implementation, but you don't have to have a type there. If you don't want a payload, don't put of type T, and you won't have this be empty. It should be a normal method call. Okay. So now let's walk through. Let's see. Check this out. There's one more thing we're going to talk about. Command. See that 13 that came from my command parameter on the button? So we're checking our can save. Our person, yep, okay, we're good. We can't step into that code. Now I'm going to click my save. We're checking can save again. Are you sure we can do this? Yes. There's my command parameter. Yep, we're good. Date, time, add years. Yeah, I know we can't break into that either. And now we're good.
What's that payload usually used for?
It's your command parameter. So, for example, let's say that I had an object or I had a form or I had something that I wanted to get information from. So I can pass the whole person itself to that method. This allows me to pass data or pass information to the method that's being invoked from the command.
So wouldn't those event handlers have access to the...
These aren't event handlers.
Okay.
These are just methods. They don't have access to anything.
Okay.
They know nothing about the control whatsoever.
Well, they're instance methods on view models, so they have access to view model state.
They have,
In this case.
yes.
So you could put on another object.
Yeah, so the thing about commands is I can have 6 buttons on here all call the same command. Okay? So it just allows you to pass data.
Well, the commands don't have to be part of the view model, they could be in a whole separate project.
No, don't do that.
No, but I'm just saying, they could.
You can do a lot of things. I wouldn't do that though. No, most likely your commands will be part of your view model. Okay. Now there's a question I didn't get asked yet. But that's okay, I never get asked it. When I change this value, and that value was committed to my object, how in the heck did that command, how did that button know to requery the can execute on that command? I didn't know that. Well, because I had to tell it. Now in WPF, not Silverlight, in WPF, there's what's called a routed command. It's another I command implementation. And it basically, the UI, this is a .NET framework command, routed command, the UI constantly checks the can execute all the freaking time. So if you have code in there and your can execute that's like hitting the database or something, you're going to see major performance hits in your application using the routed commands. With the I command, you don't get that problem. But that means you're responsible for telling the view when to check that can execute. So in this particular case, the way I've done it is I hooked into the property change event on my person object. Okay. Now my person object is very simple. It's just got some simple properties on here, first name, last name. But this interface is very important in XAML development. I notify property change. If you write XAML code, you are writing classes that implement I notify property change. What this interface does is it notifies the UI that something has changed. So update yourself, right? So, for example, we had this last updated date, right? I was saving it, we were setting this last updated in code, and the UI was refreshing, right? Well, that's because of this interface. If I were to comment this out and hit save, my UI is not updated. that value has changed. The command invokes, the command works, the value's changed in code, all your data is correct, but the user doesn't know that because the UI was not told it was changed. And this implementation is very simple. You just create a method that calls property change. And actually, this is a poor implementation because you can, if you're doing multi-threading and stuff, you want to do something like this. Property changed here. And change all this to handler. This will protect you from threading issues. But it's very simple, okay? So all your models, which is your person, that's your data, your model. Remember I was kind of model view model? That's the model part of Nvdm. So your models will implement iNotify property change. Your view models will implement iNotify property change. Now, what I've done here is whenever I get a new instance, oh, more code. See, when you rewrite code, you don't pay attention. If person is not equal to null, I don't want a memory leak. Here. We'll just unsubscribe. Anyways, demo code. So what I've done is I hooked into that property changed event. Now, anytime a property on that person object is updated, this event will fire. And what do I do in this event? Oh, look, I raised the can execute changed method on that command. So every time that updates, I check the can execute. Now the button knows to re-enable or enable or disable. That's how that works. Any questions on Delegate Command? None. Cool. How am I doing on time?
In about 20 plus minutes.
Okay.
You can go. I don't know, it's up to the group. However long you guys want to.
Let's look at
Okay.
Composite Command. Yeah, I mean, I can talk faster and try to get through this.
How much do you?
Okay. So let's talk Composite Command. A Composite Command is basically a parent command that has children commands with it. Think of save all. Who needs save all in their application? I'm the only one, really? Oh, there's one guy. Okay, I'm not alone. So a lot of the apps I write, you have to save multiple things. Once you have a save all button, everything saves. If it's in a savable state. That's kind of what a composite command does. It's this God command, right? And all the worshiping commands register for it, right? I'm a command, I'm registering to you, oh big one, and whenever you execute me too. Got that? So, let's look at the demo, and we'll look at the code. So here, I have a multiple tab interface with, it's one view, but it's two instances of the same view. Okay, so it's one view model, it's just different instances of it. So I have two people. They can be saved individually. Oh, yay, I saved you. I'm not going to save you yet. Whatever. Now, watch what happens when this becomes invalid. Right now, this save all is data bound to a composite command. Okay? Whoa. That's pretty cool. Keep in mind, I didn't point this out. That toolbar up top, it's in its own module. It's in a completely separate module, which has no references whatsoever to the people module which this view exists. Not a one. But somehow it knew that the command that is registered with it became invalid. So, oh crap, let me disable myself because you can't execute me. I'm not valid either. We'll make you valid again. Save all. He updates. This guy updates. That's pretty cool. It's really simple too. Let's look at All the complicated code it took to do that. So I have this little class called Global Commands. Now, this always confuses people. Yes, I called it Global Command, but this does not have to be a global command. Okay? When I develop, and when you develop Prism applications, you're going to have an infrastructure project. You're going to have a project which is shared and referenced by all your modules. It may have your view model base classes, it may have region names, events, commands, whatever code that every single module is going to use will reference your infrastructure project. Now, in this particular case, this demo is showing this as a global command that's shared across all modules. That doesn't have to be the case. You can define this within a module itself, and only that module will be able to listen to it. And only commands within that module will be able to register for it. But in this case, it's across all modules. Any questions on that? Okay. So, all it takes to create a composite command is to create a new composite command instance. That's it. Now, I made it static. You don't have to. But I did this because, one, I want to data bind to it using a static markup extension. I don't want to have to create a new instance of this class in order to use a command. Okay, so here we go. There's the declaration. Let's go to the toolbar. Toolbar has a single button on it, which data binds to the save all command. That save all command, that composite command, this is it. This is the namespace, INF, namespace, Prism demo infrastructure, yada yada. Global commands was the class it exists in, and there's my static property. There's my instance in the toolbar. So there is no code behind, there's nothing being created, there's nothing else. That's all there is. Now, let's go to our view model for our person view here. We've added a single line of code. Global commands, that's the class that's in the infrastructure project, which defines the save all command. And we're registering, remember that delegate command we just talked about, the one we just created? Well, we're registering that command with the save all. That's all we're doing. We added this one line of code to register all that work we already put into it with a higher power. Okay? So now what happens whenever the can execute change is called? The composite command will go through every single command that's registered for it and check its can execute. And if any of those return false, just a 1, it will be false. It will remain invalid. Okay? At the point in time where every single command that's registered with it returns true on the can execute, at that point in time, you will be allowed to invoke the composite command. Once you invoke the composite command, it goes through all the registered commands and calls the execute on each and every single I-command implementation. And I say I-command implementation because this composite command, just for a lot of you, this composite command works with I-command, period. So if you create a custom command that's not delegate, or you're using relay, doesn't matter. If it has the I-command interface on it, you can register it with the composite command.
Does it do that in the order that you register the commands?
Yes.
Okay.
It calls them in the order in which you register them. But that's not a problem because most of the time commands don't depend on other commands.
Can you also unregister, like if you close this?
Yes, you can unregister.
So you said it checks the can execute,
Yes.
and if any of them are false, then
The whole thing is
the
false.
whole thing's false. Other options to control that?
Nope.
Say
It's all or nothing. That's composite command. We're done with that. Cool. All right. Event aggregation. This is a fun one too. This is nothing specific to Prism. Event aggregation is actually a very popular pattern out there. But Prism uses this pattern and an event aggregator to help communicate through an eventing process throughout the application. So this is different than commanding. Commanding is responding to user interaction. Eventing is I'm sending out a message, and something's going to do something with that message. Right? So event aggregation is a pub-sub, publisher-subscriber model. You have something publishing an event, like, here you go, I did something. Then you have someone that's subscribed to the event, saying, oh, you did something? Oh, okay, well, let me see what you did, and I'm gonna respond to that. Okay, so let's take a look at the demo, and we'll dive into the code. So remember, we have 3 modules here. We have the toolbar module at the very top. We have a module that contains the view. And then here is a module for the status bar. None of them have reference to each other at all. So now, this one is implementing our composite command that we just went over. When I hit save, I'm going to publish an event saying this person was updated. And with event aggregation, with the event aggregator, you pass what's called a payload. Right? Some type of object, some type of state. You can pass it along with the event so the subscribers who are listening to that event can do something with the data you give it. In this particular case, I'm passing the name as a string, as a payload. The publisher is my person view. The subscriber is the status bar. So the expectation is when I click save, my status bar should update with the person who was saved. Pretty straightforward. Let's see how we did that. First, let's look at the publisher. Now, the view model here. Here comes a new interface, iEvent Aggregator. This is provided by Prism. And I have added the iEvent Aggregator into the constructor of my view model. Now remember, we're not saying view model equals new person, view model pass in instance of event aggregator. We're using a container. Once again, the container knows, oh, he's asking for an event aggregator. I know this because that type was registered with me to the Unity Bootstrapper. So I know what this is. I can give you one of those. And once again, this is a singleton. So anytime I ask for this, it's going to give me the same instance across all modules, across the whole application. So I get this event aggregator, and I'm going to store this instance off because I'm going to publish an event in my code somewhere. So I need to actually store this off. I am publishing this event in the save method. Let's look at our event declaration. Now, a composite presentation event is what's used as the event type in the event aggregation. And it is actually, it's not a property, it's actually a class. So you create a new class, in this case I call it person updated event, derives from composite presentation event of T. What do you think T is? Well, it's the payload. This is the type of the payload I'm going to pass. So if it's a business object, it would be person, or whatever your object is, string, whatever. That's your payload. That's what you're shoving along with the event. Now, we hit save. The person's going to update. Okay, we're done updating. Now I want to send out a message to anyone listening that that occurred. So we use a simple API called event aggregator get event of T, T being the type of event you want. In this case, it's the person updated event. Then we call the publish. And then we pass the payload, which in this case is the person's first and last name. Pretty simple. Event aggregator, get event, publish. We're done. Okay, so that gets published out into application land. Now you have to have a subscriber. Someone's going to have to do something with that, right? So let's go to our status bar view model. Our status bar has a message property on it. That's what the status bar is data binding to. Is where you see the text, right? Okay, so we've seen this before. Here's my view model constructor. Here's my event aggregator I'm asking for from the container. It's going to give me one. Now, I don't have to store this instance off because I'm going to use it right away. Now I'm going to say, hey, event aggregator, get event of person updated, because this is what I'm listening for. I'm going to subscribe to this event. And I want this method to execute when it gets invoked, which is in this case, person updated. Here's my payload that I'm going to look at. In this case, I'm just setting the message to blank was updated, and the payload is the person's name. I know this because I wrote the app. So you might be asking, well, what happens when I have two of these views and I do the composite save all? Matt kind of touched on it. It's the order in which they were registered. So Carl here was the last one registered. So if I hit save all, the event for me, for Brian Lagoon, is that event will get published and will get handled. But immediately following that, so will Carl. Well, Carl will be the last man standing in the status bar because his event was the last one to be published and the last one to be handled. Okay? Any questions on event aggregation?
So it would be, you can use the same concept for all those notification messages in the applications, right?
For what?
For the notification messages that we did, like in different models and different parts of that.
You can do that. Yeah, event aggregation is just a simple, I'm sending out this message and whoever's listening to it, who cares about it, can do whatever they want with it. So you can have multiple subscribers, multiple publishers, it doesn't matter.
Multiple different types of events.
And different types of events.
So if I'm subscribing to the person updated event and somebody sends a
Person deleted event, you won't listen to the deleted. You won't get anything about person deleted. You only know about person updated because that's what you subscribe to. So if you wanted to have a person deleted event, you would have another line of code here that subscribes to that particular event. You have to opt in. And it uses weak events, so don't worry, you're safe with memory leaks and all that stuff. It's a weak event pattern.
So you don't have to unsubscribe.
You don't have to. I would recommend unsubscribing. There is a unsubscribe method. But, like I said, you don't have to.
it automatically unsubscribes until your object got garbage collected.
Yes.
If you're doing anything expensive in your event handler, then you do want to unsubscribe.
Right, like I said, it doesn't prevent you from writing leaky code or code with problems in it. It just gives you a lot of tools. Okay, so I don't have time to really show you anything else or go anything else in detail, but I can show you an app that I'm building that I'm actually sharing with everyone, and I am actually recording these so you can watch how I'm building it on XAML.tv. Right now I've only done like 4 parts. Let's scroll down here. So I've got to part 4 so far. But basically I'm recording step by step how to build this application. This application is called IG Outlook, and the purpose of this app was I was getting tons of questions about solving real-world problems you're going to run into building an app. Like we're talking, injecting the Outlook groups, the ribbon tabs, having those switch around depending on what you navigate to, having all those switch out, and have your views switch out, navigating all that stuff, right? So like, you know what? Let me just solve all those problems at once. So I'm just going to write this big app, and it's going to be a multi-part series until I decide it's done. There's no end to it. It's just, for instance, the other day someone asked me a question on my blog, why would you use a region behavior? Man, that's a good question. So I had to think of a good scenario to use a region behavior and show it off. So I did it in this app. So let's take a look at it. Okay, so this is a Prism app that targets both WPF and Silverlight using 99% of the code. And when I say using 99%, I mean the exact same code, the exact same file as it exists on disk. So let's just see what I mean by that. In my Silverlight app, I have a Bootstrapper. I also have a Bootstrapper in my WPF application. You see this little link icon? Looks like a little shortcut. That is actually linking to the exact same file on disk that the Silverlight one is using. So if I try to open the Bootstrapper in my WPF application, sorry, I can't do it. It's already opened. So this is the exact same code. It's just being included in the project for compilation. Any questions about that?
How did you set that up?
Boom! I was waiting for that. Man. Okay. It's really easy to do. So, always start with the lowest common denominator when creating shared code. In this case, Silverlight. WPF has much more features than Silverlight ever will. So I start the app in Silverlight. It makes it easier to share down. So after you create my code, and you can do this with any code you write. It's not Prism specific. Any code you write, WinForms, web forms, doesn't matter. You go to your project, you're going to add an existing item. You navigate around, you say, oh, what am I looking for? I need something in this folder, or whatever I'm looking for, it doesn't matter. I just need a file. You see this add? See this little drop down arrow? Click that. Add as link. So now that's the exact same file, code file. Now, just be careful when you do this if you're going cross-platform, because you're going to have namespace issues, you're going to have feature differences, syntax differences. So how do you get around that? Well, you're going to use what's called the compiler directive, a pre-compilation symbol. Has anyone not seen this syntax before? If some term, do something else, do some other code. Like in this particular case, I'm saying, hey, if I'm in Silverlight, use this namespace. If I'm in WPF, I'm using the other two namespaces. I don't care about the other one. Has anyone not seen this? Everyone's seen that? Okay. So you know how to declare? Everyone knows how to declare one of these? One of those symbols? Okay, cool. If you don't know, let me know. I'll show you. It's not a big deal. You know, there's always someone who doesn't say anything, so I'm going to show you anyways. There's always that person. Go into your project properties, click on build, and you just define your symbols here, common limited list. Right? So if you want to go different .NET versions, you're writing an app that's being upgraded, but you need some type of compatibility code. Like, oh, I want to use this new optional parameters list, right? Well, crap, that doesn't exist in 3.5. So I'm going to write a compilation symbol that says, hey, if you're .NET 4, use this method. If you're .NET 3.5, use this method. Okay, same concept. Okay, so that's how I'm sharing the code. And I'm not just sharing code. I'm sharing entire views, like the entire view. I'm just copying the view over. See, all these views have that little link icon on it. And because I'm using Inversion controls, the cross-platform, they allow me to do that. There are some cases where you can't do that, such as the ribbon, because we don't have a cross-platform ribbon. Okay, so I bet you want to see this app run, huh? Let's go, we'll debug the Silverlight version side by side. Here, we'll go the WPF version. Okay. So these do the same thing. They're the same code, same app. I click around, they all behave the same. So let's just concentrate on looking at one. Because we both know they do the same thing now. Because I like WPF, we're looking at WPF. Okay, so here, it's basically Outlook. It's an application that's going to mimic Outlook. It's using Inversion controls, although for those of you who don't use Inversion, you're crazy. I'm just kidding. You know, if you're using another vendor like Telerik or DevExpress or whatever, don't worry, you can adapt this code to work with your library of choice. You just have to write your own custom region adapter, right? I had to write region adapters for the Outlook bar and for the ribbon. So I have two custom region adapters for that. Other than that, you can use whatever you want. So, one of the common, let's talk about the structure of the app first. We have 3 modules. We have the mail module, the calendar module, and contacts module. Okay, these are the major functional areas of this app. They're all pulled out to the separate modules. So anything you do with mail, including this group, this view, and any tab you see will be in a mail module. Okay, so for example, I'm going to click on inbox. Immediately you see a tab was injected because it knows I'm on my mail. Now, one of the problems I solved, which you can't see just by looking at the UI, is that as I navigate through my inbox, drafts, sent items, you can see that that view's data is updated. Okay, I'm navigating to the same instance of this view, and I'm passing a parameter to the view telling it what folder I'm in. There's no need to recreate an entire view just because I navigate to drafts, right? So you don't want to keep recreating stuff. It's already been created. Ribbon tab, same thing. It's the same instance. So we're not recreating visual elements. We're keeping our visual rendering down to a minimum. So I'll have all the data. It's going to take that parameter. It's just going to hit the database server for the data parameter, right? What do you need? Oh, you need the deleted items? Here, I'll give those to you, right? So, and I'll show you how to do this ribbon thing. It's actually pretty cool. I used my custom region behavior that the guy requested. Why would you use that? There's a reason. So now, what happens when you go to another group in a different module? Well, you click on that. Now I'll get all the calendar information. This group, this view, and that tab are in the calendar module. This group, this view, that tab is in the contacts module. Right? So these are views that are being, these 3 views are injected with each other. You can see them side by side. These are, this represents 3 different modules. Right? Now you have other elements like the tab where you only see one at a time. Same thing for the view. Let's check out that ribbon tab stuff. This is really cool. I think you guys will appreciate this. So I wrote a custom region adapter because I never talked about it. I said I was going to talk about it for the non-XAML people. We're going to talk about data binding. Right? So the people who aren't really familiar with data binding, you saw the syntax I was using: binding command, binding property name, right? Well, how does that work? Well, in XAML, there's this concept of what's called a data context. And all that does is it tells the view where to look for its data. That's it. So when I have binding command name, it says, oh, command name, okay, save all command. Where is that? I got to check my data context for it. Oh, there's a property called that. I'm going to bind to it. We're good to go. So when you look at this UI, you have to imagine, because this isn't near done yet, you have to imagine there's going to be a whole bunch of data here. This view is going to have a view model, right? That ribbon that goes to this view is going to execute commands against this view model. But that view, that tab, and this view don't know about each other. So how in the heck am I going to get a button to execute and act on something that exists over here? How in the world is that going to happen? I love interfaces. Who doesn't develop with interfaces? Prism will make you just love interfaces. You'll never go back. Okay. So, we're going to talk a little bit about Nvdm. Just a little bit. Because it's really simple. A lot of people overcomplicate it. I'm going to dumb it down. Nvdm, the core concept of Nvdm. You have a class that represents all the data and state for a view. Do we understand that? We have a view that needs to display that state and data to the user. And you remember that data context I just talked about? Nvdm is taking this class and setting this view's data context to that class instance. Done, Nvdm. That's it, Nvdm. So I never use any Nvdm framework personally. I never use Nvdm Lite, Caliburn Micro, and Cattell. I never use them, don't have to. Because I have the simplest implementation of Nvdm. All my views implement, so I have a view base. Everyone has base classes in their apps. I have a view base which implements iView. And iView has a contract on it that says you have to have an iView model. I don't care what it is, but it has to have an iView model. So whenever this is set, whenever it gets a view model, this property is set, view model, you see what I'm setting? I'm setting the view's data context to that instance. And when I get it, I'm just getting the data context back. It's simple. It's not complicated whatsoever. So if we look at a view, like the mail view, you see I have a iMailView view model. Wow, I named that really weird. Which has some code on here. Here's my view model. Okay, and it implements the just go look at it right quick. It implements iView model. Now what's iView model have on it? That's the title. Okay, cool. That's all it has on it. Big deal. That's all this app needs right now. So when my view is created, it's taking in the iMailView view model. And remember, oh, I actually get to show you registering a type. So before, every type you've seen in a constructor has already been registered for you. You didn't have to worry about it. Well, when you start having your own custom interfaces, that changes. I'm registering my type. I'm saying, whenever I ask for an iMailView view model, give me an instance of the MailView view model. That's how I register my types. That's how the container now knows whenever I ask for this, it's going to give me one of those. So, guess what? I'm asking for one of those. It's creating it. I'm passing it to my base class, which is this guy, which sets that property. And now my data context is set to my view model. Done. That's how it gets all its data. Any questions? That's kind of confusing a little bit, but really it's not. All we're doing is setting the data context of our view to an instance of a view model. That's Nvdm. Commanding, messaging, all that other stuff, that's not Nvdm specific. That has to do with just application development. Okay? Cool. Now, we understand the view model part. Now we got to get back to how on earth do we get the ribbon tab to have the same data context as the view that's being shown down here. Well, I wrote this little custom, I wrote an attribute and a region behavior. And what this region behavior does is it checks the view, it grabs the attributes from it, it says, oh, I have an instance, or you have an attribute on you, you're trying to create a ribbon tab of type this. So in this case, this case, of type home tab. What's home tab? Let's take a look. Menus, home tab. And it's a ribbon tab item. Big whoop. Now this ribbon tab item has an interface on it called iRibbonTabItem. So now I grab that type, I create an instance of it, and I set the ribbon tabs view model to the views view model. They're in sync now. We're done, we got it. I made the connection. Now, anytime I create a new tab, I can just extend my application and just add an attribute to the view. Oh, I gotta click on something. That's freaking cool. Like, oh, you need a new report tab. Okay, no problem. Let me create the tab. Let me create the buttons. Okay, all the commands exist in the view model. I'll put the attribute. We're done. There you go. There's your tab. Oh, you need a contextual tab. No problem. We can handle contextual tabs too. And once again, I navigate away to a different module. All those other tabs disappear because they don't care. I come back, whoop, there they are. And I'm on the same folder from when I left. Right, so I'm keeping that state. I'm not losing where I was. The user doesn't lose where they were at. So what's this mean? This means if I had a line of business application where someone's working on something, they don't have to save to leave. That's a big deal when you're talking about efficiency, especially in manufacturing, construction engineering is the industry I was in. The ability for them to be able to leave what they're doing without having to save was huge. Just click around, pop, 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 pop. And then, of course, we would give indications of what was dirty and what wasn't dirty, and breadcrumbs if necessary. And yeah, we wrote some pretty sick apps, but very powerful. So, but this app, you can download the code, you can watch the source, watch the videos of how I'm building it. It explains how everything was put together. And if you guys want to see something, just let me know, and I'll squeeze it in the app somehow. Let me see an example of this. How do you show a pop-up? How do you, I don't know, animate something coming in from the left? Whatever. I mean, what do you think? Pretty cool though, right? But if you look at all this, the big thing I want to get about, talk about is the simplicity, the structure. It's very easy to navigate. There's no code. These views, they're not going to have code behind them. It's simple. It's just so easy. It's testable. It's maintainable. You can work on a module, you can work on a module, you can work on a module at the same time. Different modules, because they don't depend on each other. And now we've delivered a project. Instead of 6 months, it took us 2. Because I don't have one guy waiting on him to finish his part on this module because I have some tight coupling to some service he's using. Right? I have an interface. I don't have to wait for him to finish his service. I have an interface with the methods defined. I got to just start writing code, write my view models against that interface, because my container will figure out what concrete implementation to give me when we run it. So now I can test it, team development, we got loose coupling, high cohesion, right? This is fun stuff. And I like how it's structured. Like my OCD just kicks in and I see this. This is cool. Any questions, guys? I'm probably over. But I got lots more to show, man. There's a whole navigation framework for navigating, nonlinear navigation, which is just insanely powerful. Because not only can your view take place in the navigation, your view model can take place as well. So both of them can take place in view model navigation. Like, are you being navigated to? Navigated from? Can you be navigated to? Pass me some parameters. I mean, just your journal can go back, can go forward. So you're trying to do back buttons, forward buttons. I mean, all that crazy stuff is built in for you. It's really powerful. And this actually uses the navigation. To show you how powerful it is, I could talk forever, I'm telling you. This is the only place, so I have, remember the composite command I was talking about? Well, I have one called navigate. It's a global one because every single module is going to call this. It calls navigate command. It takes a path, navigation path. This is the only place in the entire app in which I am calling request navigate, which is part of the API for Prism navigation. And it's in my shell. It's the only place. There's no other navigation code anywhere in the app. That's how powerful it is. Extremely loosely coupled. I can throw any module I want into this application. That's all I got. That's all I got time for, I should say. Any questions whatsoever?
Thank you.
Is that why you shut up? Okay, I guess I'm gonna call that it then. Let me put my contact information up one more time. Just in case you guys do have a question. It don't even have to be prison related. I'm a XAML guy, you have a XAML question, just getting started. How do I do this? What's the control? Whatever. I'm here to help.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, no problem.